I thought I would show the progress of where I'm at tearing the car apart. So I've actually accomplished quite a bit in a day and a half. But I've got the front tore down, radiator out, AC condenser out. Exhaust is out of it. Next step are the headers. I figured they'd be easier to take out without the exhaust. So here's what the exhaust looks like. You want to see nice looking welds. That's pretty impressive. One of the things that's kind of funny is access to the header bolts. As you can see, there's plenty of access to everything. To get the intake manifold off, you got 5 bolts on each side, and then this harness goes in the back. That's the only goofy part about it, but it does make room for the harness. But you can have that off in 5-10 minutes real easy. You got the whole intake right out of the way. One of the areas I've got a problem with is right here at the back of the engine. As you can see, there's a lot going on. You got the heater hose, which on these engines runs from the water pump through a metal tube to the back, and then the return line comes through over there. So the metal tube is nice in that it's a compact routing, but the problem is with all the wiring harness back here that you run into a lot of conflicts trying to get the bypass valve for the heater core. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet, as this runs underneath the intake manifold, but I want to make that heater core bypass a lot easier to get the hoses up to it and routed. So I'll come up with something, but for now, that's one thing I'm thinking about, is eliminating a lot of this. Unfortunately, I can't eliminate the wiring harness. I suppose I could, but I'd have to redo a lot of wires and get that connector somewhere else out of the way. So having it sit in the back of the intake manifold is kind of nice, unless you've got conflict in there. You can see the engine itself. I can get my hand behind it, but there's not a lot of space. It's less than an inch, I would say, of space between the firewall and the back of the block, at least on the passenger side. The driver's side's got a little more gap over there. Probably got an inch, a couple inches over there. So I'll figure that out once I get the block out and decide what I'm going to do. But the other thing I was also trying to figure out is how to pull an engine. I couldn't do, well, I suppose I could, but I normally use my cherry picker and come in from the top, grab it, pull it out. But as you can see, I'm kind of up in the air here, and not a lot of space. I'm trying to drop it through the bottom, and I do think I have enough space to, but I've got to pull the suspension. So I've got to pull all this framework out, and that'll require holding the engine in place. And then I can drop the engine down between the stands, the ramps, I should say. So that's my plan. Once I drop it down here, and I can slide it out the front and have more access. And to do that, I had to redesign my stand here, get a far enough away picture. So I've had this stand I've used for about 5 years. Never pulled an engine with it, but I've had engines on it. When I put them onto the engine stands, and it's a 1,100-pound winch. So I beefed up the stand to take more weight than our old 4 cylinders. And I'll probably use that so I can drop the engine down, use that to support the block and transmission while I pull the frame out from underneath. So to get the frame out, I'll have to yank all the front end, you know, the disc and everything out of there. But on the plus side, it'll give us a good look at what's there so we can see how it was done. There it is. It's out of the car. This thing is massive. I think the transmission weighs almost as much as the engine. It took a lot just to lift the tail shaft of that tranny once I had it up on the creeper. It definitely weighs a lot. I'd like to know how much it actually weighs. I've heard 550, something like that. I think that's what Tom had said. Boy, it's massive. Getting it out was tough. The biggest part is never having done it before, trying to figure out a good way to do it. But I now have better ideas. I actually think I can do it without taking the intake manifold off. I'll have to try that when I put it back in. As you can see, I've got pretty good clearance between the bottom of the car and the engine, as long as I have that front spoiler off of it. So now this will free me up to get in the engine compartment and start doing things. It goes in for paint in 1 week, so I've got to have all this wiring and all the lines and everything removed. I do want to make some upgrades. Number one, going to a bigger brake line, because I'm going to put a bigger master cylinder in. I'm getting ready to paint the underside. I've got most everything tore out that I'm going to take out. I'm going to leave the fuel pump in just because it's not welded, it's bolted through. So I think I'll leave that in place, plus the wiring's in there. And then the rear end, of course, stays. I was able to pull the shocks down thanks to these limit straps. They do a really good job of holding everything in place, so I don't have to worry about that falling down. So I've wire brushed everything. I'm going to spray paint everything a black rust reformer. And I'm not going to go beyond that. I was thinking of doing bed coating, but I don't think I will. We'll see what happens, how this coat comes out. So I thought I would just give a quick slide under and show how this is all done. You've got 4 links that hold the suspension. Anti-sway bar. It goes underneath. And of course the limit straps. Now on the frame there's a cross member that goes right at the top of the wheel wells. So that connects the tops. And then these top links to the rear end, they go to another member that's been welded in. And then there's a big cross member that comes across under the drive shaft. As you can see how massive that is. It's good, probably 5 inches high, 2 inches wide, 2 inches by 5, maybe by 4. And it's got this massive tube in the center that connects it. So it really strengthens the back, I'm sure. And then at the front of the rear end link, the bottom one, you've got this steel tubing that goes up, goes through the original tubing. I call it tubing, it's the channel that's there. So you essentially have it from the back up through the original, then it comes through the original. You got the front that goes up. So really, all of this original material is still here. So the frame that he built for the front attaches at the front here, and at the right side, and here at the rear of the wheel well. The rear mount for the K-frame is not being used. The bolts are still there because they're punched in, but they're not used. So really you've got 4 mounting points for the new K-frame in the front. I guess you call it a K-frame now still. So there isn't as much modification as you would think. Now of course the trans tunnel is redone. And this is where I had to cut it out to get at the solenoid for the transmission, for the rear lockout. I'll tack that in from the inside if I get a chance. And I may, where I put the new transmission in, this area may have to get more clearance. So I may have to cut this and redo it. We'll see. Hopefully it'll just fit right in here, and I'll be able to mount the shifter in this location, because it's supposed to be 6.5 inches back from that location, so that'll set me right about here. But I'm not sure if I'm going to need more clearance up in this area. I'm going to assume no and just get this painted so I can get it done. Emergency brake cables come through just like the 90s Daytonas all do, so nothing fancy here. So really it's not as much work as you would think. The work is in making it all fit, doing the design work, and coming up with the correct solution. I'm sure there were many tries before he got it right. But these cars could be a fairly easy conversion like Tom wanted to do if he just had somebody do the kits. Then it would be more of a bolt-in process because you'd have all the measurements and figuring out done. So that's where it stands. I'm going to get it painted today, and I've still got 5 days before it's got to go to the painter, so I'll be able to do some reworking in here. The other modification I want to make is to rear mount the battery. I really don't like the air cleaner being mounted up under the passenger fender where the charcoal filter used to be. I've done it on my other cars, so I really like the idea of mounting the air filter where the battery mounts, like I've done on my other my Laser and my Daytona. I've done those enough that I've already got the template for it, so I can get that water jetted. So that'll be my plan, is to mount the air filter on where the battery goes, rear mount the battery. That'll free up some space. I may even put a charcoal canister back in on the passenger side. I do have the fuel cell out. And here's the pile of parts. I'll put the front suspension mostly back together. I won't put the sway bar in. And hopefully this will be together this weekend. I'll have the interior finished being ripped out, and I'll be ready for him to paint. This is the K-frame. It holds the engine and power steering rack. So as you can see, it's quite the design. This is the motor mount, and these are for the lower control arms mounted in there, and they've got a spacer on them. Actually, the spacer would go to the front, pushing it back, and that centers the front wheel. And I tell you, it really opens up a lot of room in the wheel well when you get that front wheel absolutely centered. My other ones have the stock K-frames from the 90s, and the front wheel doesn't have the turning radius that this does. You can really turn lock to lock and not have any issues. But really did a nice job on designing that, and I wish I could weld that good. Everything on this car welding wise really done well. So that's what they look like. The rack sits in the back, pointing straight down instead of like on ours, pointing up. Let's see the profile. I'd love to see the dimensions on this, but I think they're lost. I'll have to talk to Tom about it.